Well, let's get more on this now with Peter Ruff, the director of the Centre on Europe and Eurasia at the Hudson Institute. He joins us now from Washington. Good to have you with us, Peter. We heard there from the Ukrainian president again appealing to world powers to supply Ukraine with more weaponry, more advanced weaponry to fight Russia's aggression. Do you believe the West is doing enough at this stage to support Ukraine's war effort?
I think the West could be doing more. Of course, the Ukraine Contact Group, under the auspices of the Germans, but led by the United States, will be meeting tomorrow to go over the next tranche of weapon systems that it can supply Ukraine. It has done a lot to keep Ukraine in the fight. Early on, I would say that the West was rather reluctant when it thought in the early days and weeks of the war that Ukraine would fall. But thereafter, it has ramped up its weapons provisions to Ukraine, also applied sanctions against Russia, and in addition to that, provided budgetary support to Ukraine. But there's much more that the West can do. And as your segment just showed, the key debate right now lies around main battle tanks for maneuver warfare and also long-range strike systems like the ATACMS been debated in the West. And neither count has the Biden administration nor many of our European allies prepared to offer those to Ukraine.
No, that's right. And in square focus right now is Germany, Europe's largest economy. There's growing pressure on Berlin to supply Ukraine with more advanced weapons. Until now, the government there has been quite reluctant to do so. We know that's partly because they've held a more pacifist stance since World War II. Do you think Germany should be breaking that status quo and supplying Kiev with more weapons at this point?
I do think it's time to send the Ukrainians NATO standard main battle tanks like the Leopard 2 systems, which have been hotly debated of late. The German explanation for why they are unwilling to provide that weapon in particular, but really a whole class of weapons going back over months, has shifted. At one point in time, it was the fear of nuclear escalation. At another, it was justified as part of coalition management. The Germans do not want to be first, but part of a coalition. Now, of course, the United Kingdom has announced that it's prepared to offer the Challenger battle tank to the Ukrainians. So that reason ostensibly would go away. But I wouldn't lose sight of the fact that standing behind us all is the United States as the cornerstone ally. And the US has been unwilling to provide its own main battle tank, the Abrams tank, to the Ukrainians. Now, the Leopards are really the target that the Ukrainians desire because there's a large spare parts market in Europe. There are many NATO allies on the continent that utilize the Leopard 2. Whereas the American Abrams system has really been sent and sold to other parts of the world, think, for example, North Africa or the Middle East. But without the United States at least being prepared to send one or two of these M2 Abrams, even if they're just to sit in the courtyard of the embassy, the Germans will not move. And so I think it's also incumbent on the Biden administration to show some leadership, to nudge and cajole the Germans and maybe take the first step so that the Germans can move in behind it.
While Washington hasn't sent those tanks to Ukraine as of now, it has sent billions of worth of military aid and is about to send its advanced Patriot missile defense system. So the US by far has been the biggest backer of Ukraine up until this point. But we have been hearing from some Republicans about whether or not this blank check, so to speak, should continue for Kiev's war effort. Do you expect that the Republican majority Congress may begin to push back against further attempts from US money to be spent in this conflict?
Well, this really isn't the debate we're having in Washington because during the so-called lame duck session of the last Congress, a huge package was passed as part of the omnibus bill, which means that Congress will not need to authorize more funds or appropriate more funds for the administration for at least 6 or 7 months. And so this debate has faded a little bit into the background. I would say while there are some prominent Republican voices who have taken an isolationist turn, in fact, it's been Republicans and the Republican caucus in the Congress that has held the Biden administration's feet to the fire, that has pushed for more monies than the administration has asked, that has pushed aggressively for more weapon systems. And so I do think that the rank and file member on Capitol Hill in the Senate and in the House of Representatives realizes that the U.S. is getting a great deal, so to speak. Every year we spend $800 to $900 billion in defense monies, basically to deter against two enemies, China and Russia. And here, for a minimum expenditure, without shedding any American blood, the Ukrainians have de facto destroyed a large part of the Russian army. And so This has been a good deal for the United States. I think we recognize that, and for that reason, I'm confident that at least for the coming months, the issue is in good shape.
Okay, Peter Ruff, we'll have to leave it there, but great to get your analysis as always. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.